Good afternoon, everyone. Today, we will continue with the 13th session of this special webinar series on mainstreaming for industrial revolution that are being organized by the UNIDO Directorate of Digitalization, Technology, and Agribusiness. We will continue embarking us on a more in-depth examination journey of the 4 industrial revolution technologies, their operation, mechanisms, challenges, and opportunities in the context of a specific set of industries where UNIDO is usually working. For that, as usually, I will start sharing my screen to introduce the session. My name is Alejandro Rivera Rojas, and I am the Executive Officer of the Directorate, and I will be moderating this 13th session of the webinar series titled For Industrial Revolution in Mining, Assessing the Opportunities, Challenges, and Implications. For this occasion, we have invited our distinguished panelists, Mr. Bernardo Calzadilla Sarmiento, our Managing Director, he was Director of Technical Assistance and Training at the International Organization for Standardization. Dr. Calzadilla has been leading the work in UNIDO on quality and standard for trade facilitation, investment for sustainable development and innovation in the context of the 4th Industrial Revolution. With more than 25 years of international experience in global development, his involvement including working in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. We will have with us as well Mr. Felipe Sanchez. He is a senior researcher from the Department of Strategy and Policy Planning from the Chilean Copper Commission. Felipe holds a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering from the Pontifical Catholic University of Chile and joined Master of Science degree in Advanced Mineral Resources from the University of Leuven and Freiberg University of Mining and Technology. His research focusing on innovation and mining technologies, productivity, mineral policy, and mineral markets. Previously, he worked as investment assessment analyst at the Chilean Copper Commission and as associate professor in several Chilean universities. We are also delighted to count with us with Ms. Angela von Baqueta, Innovation Associate at MindSpider. Dr. Angela experience spans several decades in the high-tech industry and academia. She has led courses, workshops, and research on innovation for international companies and universities, including the University of Geneva and the Sorbonne. Angela holds a bachelor's degree of history from the Sorbonne, a business degree from ESCP Business School, École Supérieure de Commerce de Paris, and an MBA from the European Institute of Business Administration, and a PhD from the University of Geneva. We will be also delighted to count with Mr. Rachat Abelson. He is a legal expert from the Responsible Business Conduct at the Oecd. Rachat Abelson is a legal expert for the organization and specifically working in the team for Responsible Minerals Implementation Program. Relevant projects of his own include monitoring of government implementation of the OECD commitment, fostering law enforcement cooperation on minerals and related crime, and exploring the linkages between the emerging technologies and responsible business conduct. Last but not least, as usual, we will have also a colleague from UNIDO for this panel, and we will be delighted to have Jerome Stocky. He is the Chief of Materials and Chemical Management Division. Jerome is a technical lead for the UNIDO program on artisanal and small-scale gold mining. Prior to joining UNIDO, Jerome led various projects in Europe and Arab region for a consultancy providing services to industries in managing their environmental footprints. Jerome holds a Master of Science and a Master of Advanced Studies in Hydrogeology. Dear participants, for this webinar, we would like to introduce on the topic of how 4IR industrial revolution technologies are impacting on the mining industry. In particular, autonomous vehicles and field robots are increasing the automation landscape of a greater number of mining processes. Drones are assisting the development of 3D maps of mines with great accuracy and minimum risk for workers, among others. Moreover, blockchain has introduced new possibilities for improving transparency and traceability across the entire supply chain. This session will explore the challenges and opportunities of digital technologies in the mining sector and discusses the implications for artisanal and small-scale mining operations in particular. Our Managing Director, Mr. Bernardo Calzadilla Sarmiento, will start today's webinar with welcoming remarks. Our external invited panelists then will provide further insights on the current trends and potential of digital technologies for mining industry, particularly blockchain. While our colleague Jerome will present the work of UNIDO is doing to support artisanal and small-scale mining operations. We will have a round, as usually, of initial presentations from the panelists, and later on we will continue with the discussion panel. For your information, we will be recording this session and we will make the panelists' presentations available later on in our knowledge hub, as usual. And having said that, I will stop sharing my screen now. And I will give the floor to our Managing Director. Bernardo, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes. Thank you so much. It is really a pleasure to welcome you to this latest edition of this very successful 4IR series. And this time we will focus on the mining industry. I'm particularly delighted because I have a strong linkage to the mining industry from Bolivia, where I have been working also when I was young as using the theory to measure. So I have a strong linkage to the mining sector. The fourth industrial revolution is being led by several digital manufacturing technologies with the potential to address the 2030 agenda. This is nothing new, but it is important to reiterate this, that we make the linkage to the fourth industrial revolution, to the SDG 9, but also to the aspects related to health. When we will talk about artisanal mining, it's about health, it's about the planet. And we focus today in particular on mining, and UNIDO has been working in the past in this sector, but more and more we went into the environmental dimension of it. UNIDO has also a very important flagship publication, which is the World Statistics on Mining and Utilities, which was last published in 2018. And is a unique biennial overview of the role in mining and utility activities in the world economy. So UNIDO should be proud to have this with a lot of data in relation to countries, establishment, employment, output activities in areas such as coal, iron ore, crude petroleum mining, as well as production and supply of electricity, natural gas, and water. So we have maintained this important flagship product. However, more and more we have been looking at artisanal mining, and Jerome will talk about the work we do in relation to small-scale mining. I was also exposed to this in the Amazon of Bolivia, where the gold is washed and the mercury is thrown into the river, and then you have all the consequences. 20% of all gold and providing sources of income to more than 20 million people, including nearly 5 million of women in 70 plus countries. Now, this gold mining is also very important to help clusters, SMEs, to help them to have some labeling, some jewelry produced. So the potential is very huge. Clearly, this potential also exists in relation to 4IR technologies, because they can be used, and probably we will hear more from Codelco on that, predictive maintenance, artificial intelligence Internet of Things in relation to industrial safety, but probably also in the use of robotics. Digital twinning allows for training and upskilling of the workforce in simulators, especially for safety and maintenance scenarios. Automation is used also in terms of transporting equipment, cargo within and between the mines. This is important because it allows the continuance of the mining operation. And this was very important also because the potential for infection during the pandemic was so acute. AI also can be utilized for the health and safety of workers. And this is where I say these new technologies relate to people, planet, and prosperity. And UNIDO has been also very active in terms of working with the private sector partners, supporting the member states in the extractive sectors in terms of assisting with the implementation of environmental agreements, Minamata Convention on mercury emissions. The importance of this work cannot be overstressed, as the sector is responsible for more than 30% of mercury emissions worldwide. So Jerome will be talking to us about how this works. We must also place in a systematic approach to the use of advanced innovation in the mining sector, including the development of robust quality infrastructure and standards, especially measurements is so fundamental for this sector to ensure efficient deployment of cutting-edge technology and the use of these new technologies. Precisely, I mentioned the job I was doing. It would be so easy to send a drone for making the measurement, to use a robot to go inside the mine. This will change. So thank you a lot for attending this webinar. I look forward to hearing from the contribution of our panelists, of the discussion, the experience sharing, and I thank you for the attention. Back to you, Alejandro.
Thank you very much, Bernardo, for these words, and also for showing us an aspect from your life that maybe some of us we didn't know. Okay, okay, I will continue now with the first panelist. Felipe, the floor is yours.
Do you see the presentation?
Yes, go ahead.
Perfect. 1 second. Okay, well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm honored to be here today. In this short presentation, I will talk about the general trends involving fourth industrial revolution technologies in the mining industry and the future perspectives. So first of all, I think it is important to understand the relation between mining and innovation and new technologies. Of course, innovation plays a critical role in improving the efficiency of mining processes, reducing costs, and improving productivity. Also, new technologies have allowed mining companies to exploit new deposits in more complex scenarios, such as decreasing ore grades, extreme weather conditions, deeper deposits, and harder rock mass. And finally, and especially important these days, new technologies allow mining companies to meet the increasing social and environmental awareness among communities and authorities regarding safety, environmental impact, efficiency, and the use of resources, among other important topics. So nowadays, the fourth industrial revolution technologies are producing operational changes across the entire value chain of the mining industry. First, Internet of Things, understood as a network of physical objects, such as sensors, equipment, machinery, and other sources of data, interacting, exchanging information, and acting in a coordinated way. So this generation of data is the base to conduct an integrated planning and control and support the decision-making process. The use of autonomous equipment such as hauling trucks, LHDs, drillings is expanding rapidly. In general terms, besides the benefits in safety, autonomous equipment improve productivity and reduce operational costs by increasing equipment utilization, reducing variability in the production outcome, and improving tires and components performance. Then remote operations, along with autonomous equipment, might hold the highest level of implementation among the tools that the 4IR offer. The first and more clear benefit from the remote operation centers is improving of safety by reducing the number of operators required on site. Remote operation centers can also significantly reduce OPEX and CAPEX of mining operation by reducing supporting infrastructure. As mentioned before, drones can be used for the collection of images and geophysical information in exploration activities, but also to monitor the operation, real-time topography, updating material volumes, estimations, measurements, among other tasks. Blockchain can provide transparency and traceability to the entire value chain. This will be analyzed later on this session. Then virtual reality and augmented reality, along with digital twinning, are tools that can improve the design and construction of mining projects, but also the extraction and processing operations. AR and VR can also be used for training and education on mining topics. And finally, due to the digitization, mining operations are generating enormous amounts of data. Through advanced analytic methods, it is possible to process this information, allowing its use for a better planning of activities and maintenance, and to support fast and effective decision-making process for the operation. Also, artificial intelligence and machine learning methods can be applied for mineral prospecting in order to optimize the prospection and exploration activities, reducing costs and improving the accuracy. So, regarding the special case of Chile, several of these technologies have been highly implemented, especially in the last few years. Most of the largest mining companies operating in the country have already implemented or will do it soon, integrated operation centers. Among them, Codelco, BHP, Anglo American, who recently inaugurated its unit, but also Antofagasta and Tech that are currently developing their own integrated operation centers. Also about autonomous and semi-autonomous equipment. For example, Codelco, one of Codelco mine sites have been operating by autonomous trucks since it started in 2008. And at least BHP and Antofagasta have some pilot testing project ongoing right now. Another example can be the cathode stripping robot implemented in one of Codelco's copper refineries. And also another project that was conducted by Anglo American and the tech supplier XIII Mining. The digital twin tool allows to visualize in real time and remotely the operation, check the fleet movements, status of drilling activities, among other tasks. So though some studies have predicted important potential benefits for the mining industry from this digital transformation, other studies show that the overall level of digitization in the industry is still low when compared to other industries. However, there are important differences among companies. Having some companies adopting these technologies for years now, and others a bit behind. Also, as mentioned before, some technologies such as autonomous equipment and remote operations show a higher level of implementations than compared to blockchain, for example. Likewise, the mining supplier sector in mining producing countries such as Chile or Australia presents higher levels of digitization than the rest of the economic sectors. And finally, the pandemic has had an important effect on the digital transformation process in the mining industry, accelerating it, and according to different studies and surveys, automation of processes and integrated operation centers have been highly useful to maintain productivity in this COVID-19 context. So finally, the main challenges in the next few years will be, one of them will be cybersecurity. Because of the increasing connectivity among equipment and sensors, but also between business units, mining companies could be exposed to greater risks of security breaches, cyber attacks, or even hack activism. For this reason, special attention must be put on cybersecurity. Also, the digital transformation is a process of change that goes beyond technology. It requires coordination across the whole company. So structures will suffer changes by the automation of processes and introduction of these new technologies. Also, new knowledge and skills will be required, so the mining companies should also invest in the proper training programs to face the digital transformation process. And finally, mining companies, suppliers, but also governments should work together to promote the adoption of these technologies, generating alliances, financing systems, training programs, etc. Communities have also the opportunity to get involved in this process due to the higher connectivity and transparency, which enables better channels for communication. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Felipe, for this very nice overview of the use of 4IR technologies along the processes operation in mining. This is very good represented, and also for talking on the potential challenges and future perspective for the sector regarding the context of the fourth industrial revolution. Thank you very much. We will continue now with the second panelist. Angela, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. I hope I am sharing my screen right now. Is that the case?
Yes.
Okay, great. So yeah, my name is Angela van Beck-Becerra, and I'm working for MineSpider, which is a blockchain protocol for sourcing responsible minerals. And as the innovation associate within MineSpider, I specifically focus on physical tracking technologies. So Felipe has set the scene and has shown the different building blocks of technologies within the fourth industrial revolution. So why don't we dive into specifically blockchain and some of the fundamentals of blockchain. So blockchain is actually mostly associated with cryptocurrencies and less with responsible supply chains or even mining. However, the one thing that makes blockchain so relevant for both cryptocurrencies and supply chains is its key characteristic, which renders data which is registered on the blockchain immutable. So on the anecdotal side, one of MineSpider's founders is Volker, who used to be a compliance officer and legal counsel within a big multinational company. And he always was worried that the PDF documents he had for compliance could have been photoshopped. And so when he discovered blockchain technology, he actually found the solution to that problem. And that's why he's one of the co-founders of MineSpider. So the way blockchain works is it creates a unique digital document which cannot be changed. And this is done through a mechanism where distributed network blocks are linked between each other, storing the information simultaneously in a synchronized way. Thus, they create an unalterable record of this digital asset. And this is what creates true traceability, and which we will discuss in a bit more detail later. However, because this data cannot be altered, the classic dilemma of databases, namely the garbage in, garbage out problem, is even more relevant. How does one ensure that this data that is being fed into the blockchain is specifically correct? And so if we look at the next slide, there is something within these different building blocks of the fourth industrial revolution technology, namely the Internet of Things / tracking technologies that can really help with this challenge. So Felipe already defined the Internet of Things, and we'll use a really broad definition specifically linked to tracking technology. So for us, we're defining these tracking technologies within the Internet of Things as devices that communicate between each other electronically to specifically exchange data. And so, of course, you all know what those type of data are, because if we look at some of these technologies, it could be everything from barcodes, which one knows very well, but then also our RFID and sensors, but also cellular networks that have great broadband capacities and also roaming. And then something that's a little bit less known are markers and tangents, which are actually physical markers for identifying or giving a unique digital identity to specific materials that need to be tracked across the supply chain. And then, as Bernardo highlighted, satellites and drones are also great for tracking the physical reality and seeing what is happening in the Amazon, what is happening on this open air mine. Is the ore that is supposed to be produced there really happening there, etc. And so the beauty of these enabling technologies, so these tracking technologies, is that they are creating a physical link to the digital world. So we're feeding in information that has been created in the physical world into the digital world. And so it's kind of the reality check of what's happening in the field, and that is then being registered within the blockchain. So that's why these tracking technologies are the solution to the garbage in, garbage out challenge, where often one has to make sure that the data that is fed into this database is of highest quality, or else nothing is really relevant. So that kind of brings me then to the next slide. So how can a combination of blockchain and Internet of Things tracking technology transform the mining industry? And Bernardo and Felipe already gave some examples. So I would just like to focus on the different data points and digital technologies can enable creating really truth and transparency within the blockchain. So if we start with the miner, this could be ASM or any other mining industry. First of all, he has a personal ID, personal data that can be linked to his mining certificate. And so if he has a mobile phone, for instance, one can use facial recognition to identify him, but then also identify his exact location, for instance. And so if you look at this, we have all of these different events within the supply chain that will create data points, and all of these data points can be registered on the blockchain. So, you know, everything from the production side, but then also let's imagine the miner sells the gold is then also exported, gold is refined. So this is really a very powerful combination that can enable specifically trust, which has been the issue within ASM. And then, of course, long-term, one can even envision how all of this information could possibly even enable a trade platform where actually, you know, the mobile phone of the miner is a combination of a digital wallet, but also gives him access to a worldwide market. So that is the other aspect of what blockchain can enable, and that makes it so powerful, in addition to, you know, bringing trust and transparency and traceability within the supply chain. So if we look at the tools, one of the tools that leverages blockchain is specifically what we have created at MineSpider, and those are certificates. So what we have is a user-friendly web-based portal where various actors from the mining supply chain can create their certificates according to their compliance requirements. So for instance, let's take an example of shipping certificates. So the beauty of this is that all the different partners within the supply chain can see where they are and exchange information in a coherent and also real-time way. So let's look at a very precise example of how this tool looks. So for instance, in Rwanda, we are working with a smelter that is, so this is not gold, but it's tin, and the tracking technology we're using are QR codes. and on the tin ingots, and everything that then goes through the supply chain is registered on the MineSpider blockchain. And that information includes everything from, provenance, the key characteristics, weight, everything you can imagine, but then more importantly, also the compliance documents that are so important, in addition to, of course, the usual shipping documents. So as I already alluded to earlier, privacy is a pretty big issue within supply chains. And of course, not all the players want to reveal who their sub-suppliers are, who they're working with. And so our tool has different information levels, namely a public layer, a private layer, and a transparency layer that specifically enables the party to determine who within this network of supplies gets to see what type of information. And so if I just summarize our vision and what we're trying to accomplish is a world where tracked responsible products are the norm rather than the exception. And that is why we're leveraging this technology, which are key building blocks within the fourth industrial revolution ecosystem, to come to a world, a landscape where we align closely with the SDG values and accomplish exactly a world where sustainability is linked to traceability and transparency within the mining supply chain. So with this, I think, conclude. So please feel free to send me any questions. You have my contact details, and I will hand over to the UNIDO team.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Angela. I think that this has been a very nice presentation, particularly for showing us all these insights on blockchain and Internet of Things tracking technologies, how they are transforming the mining industry, and particularly on the MineSpider digital certificates tools. Thank you very much. I think my colleagues will appreciate this very well. Well, we will continue. Our next speaker will be Rachad. Rachad, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the invite. We really appreciate having this conversation and sharing this info with your audience. So hello, everyone. I'm with the OECD Center for Responsible Business Conduct. As Alejandro said, we're the part of the OECD charged with developing government-backed standards on business behavior. In particular on today's topic of discussion, which is responsible supply chains of minerals. This involves advising governments and business on how to identify, prevent, and mitigate negative impacts in business operations or throughout business supply chains through the implementation of the OECD Due Diligence guidance for responsible mineral supply chains. We do this through focused research, development of due diligence tools, trainings, awareness raising, and through coordination among policymakers so that there's a coherent, consistent approach to legislation.
Sorry, Rachad, you may want to share your slides if you have.
I'll get to that in a second. Yeah, sorry, I'm just kind of providing a broader introduction to everything that's not show yet.
Excellent.
Yeah, and actually that's great. Here, I'll share it right now. I prepared this just small presentation to cover, what the standards, what standards exist to support artisanal and small scale mining specifically, but responsible mining sector in general, and how new technology can help overcome some of the challenges associated with ASM in particular, but broader due diligence challenges as well. And then some broader considerations governments and companies can keep in mind when applying the technology to mineral supply chains. A lot more detailed discussion on these issues can be found in the paper that you could see a screenshot of here that our team wrote on this subject called Is There a Role for Blockchain in Responsible Supply Chains? While that paper and most of my intervention today are generally focused on blockchain, almost all of what I discuss can be applied to other technological solutions that are focused on supporting human rights due diligence and sustainable economic development in mining communities. So first, let me start with the standard. The OECD due diligence guidance provides companies with a common framework and detailed recommendations to identify and address these negative impacts. and to engage transparently with mining communities through progressive improvements to manage the negative impacts over time. It's directed at all companies in the mineral sector, from miners, large and small, to exporters, refiners, all the way down to the product manufacturers and retailers. And it covers all mineral supply chains. So not just gold, which we're focused on here, but cobalt, mica, tin, tantalum, tungsten, all mineral supply chains. Implementation of the guidance, while the guidance itself is a voluntary standard, it has been incorporated into legislation in the US and the EU. So it's a legal requirement in the US and the EU for certain companies in both of those jurisdictions. But because the guidance specifically recommends cascading the due diligence responsibility to your suppliers and sub-suppliers, even though the legislation is quite narrow, the footprint of it and the effects of this legislation are actually quite far-reaching. The approach recommended in the guidance isn't really like the typical compliance approach. I think the slide keeps moving forward by accident. Don't know why. Okay, you can look at it later, but essentially the principles of due diligence that I wanted to show you was that the objective of the instrument is really to have sustainable continued engagement in mining communities, not to disengage through, and not to de-risk your supply chain through disengagement. So the idea is to stay engaged in mining communities. Engagement with ASM in particular is critical for responsible supply chains. So ASM can represent about 20% of most mineral supply chains. It's about 20% in gold. It could be higher in other materials. And ASM is estimated to employ at least 45 million people globally, with the livelihoods of millions more sustained through ASM and other economic activity around these small mine sites. ASM is often a very informal activity. It takes place in remote areas with low government capacity or possibly on the margins of larger industrial mine sites, making ASM miners particularly vulnerable to exploitation by armed groups or criminal networks or corrupt government actors. This is not to say that ASM is particularly more or less risky than large-scale mining. On the contrary, a lot of these issues like corruption, money laundering, child labor, sexual exploitation, these all take place on large-scale and industrial mine sites as well. However, the vulnerability and the lack of capacity in ASM make it much harder for the artisanal and small-scale miners to address these impacts and overcome some of these challenges in order to align with best practice. One of the key messages that I hope I can leave you with today is that the focus of new technology and considerations of implementing new technology should be to engage responsibly with all mineral supply chains, including artisanal and small-scale mining, in order to help them overcome some of those challenges. So now to get into the technology. Solutions to address impacts in mineral supply chains, as Angela presented, are already like broadly existing. Blockchain, the hype around blockchain really started a few years ago, and so I'll be talking about here. But the discussion is really much broader than that. And as I said, the points I make on what companies should consider when implementing a technological solution really apply beyond blockchain. The reason I focus on blockchain specifically, it's probably one of the most tailored solutions for supply chain due diligence and supply chain management. And starting three years ago, when the excitement around blockchain was really starting to build, the OECD conducted an informal mapping exercises of various mining specific initiatives that were popping up. We found at least 6 major blockchain initiatives related to gold supply chains, 3 more on cobalt supply chains, a few on diamonds, a few on tin. And so the list goes on, and it's really has gotten even bigger since we started our mapping. And all of this hype that was generated around the time made understanding the potential for blockchain kind of especially confusing for companies and policymakers. So what we did is we drafted this research paper to look deeper into those proposed technological solutions. Our approach to this paper was really agnostic to the technology. So we weren't trying to promote one form of traceability or chain of custody mapping over another. We were just trying to understand the topic and inform different stakeholders. So what challenges does this technology seek to address? Well, as many of you might know, these supply chains can be extremely complex and fragmented, especially if you're looking at it from a downstream perspective. Many multinationals, particularly those involved in manufacturing, have thousands of suppliers, sometimes 10, 15 tiers in their supply chain between them and the mining site. And the exact relationship between those suppliers is constantly changing. These supply chains also include both informal and formal supply chain actors in both the developed and developing part of the world. This makes it really difficult for companies to track where the goods are coming from, and also makes it difficult to understand who's handling the minerals in their supply chain, which are both really key sets of information for when you're conducting supply chain due diligence and trying to understand your risk. And also due to the formal and informal nature of some of these actors and the different strengths of governance among the supply chain, where those actors are located, it's really a significant challenge to ensure the accuracy of the information reported, as Angela mentioned in her presentation. So how do the technological solutions, in this case, blockchain, propose to address some of these supply chain challenges then? We've seen a number of solutions over the past few years that advertise and in some cases achieve really interesting results that could support supply chain due diligence. So the blockchain can allow for faster, more secure, and potentially more accurate supply chain visibility, which in turn can lead to more easily identifying fraud and other anomalies in the supply chain, and more transparency into who's handling the goods, which can help companies better target their human rights due diligence and other supply chain due diligence efforts. And then also another aspect is on virtual currency and self-executing contracts, which could allow for better bankability to vulnerable groups who really struggle for legal sources of finance. Some of the more positive examples we've seen that we highlighted in the paper, but there are plenty, there are other interesting examples out there, but some interesting case studies in the paper are one from Volvo Cars, who are using a blockchain to track cobalt in their supply chains back to mine sites that have been examined by independent auditors and that are verified to be conducting business responsibly. And also from the alcohol producer and distributor AB InBev, who are implementing blockchain and smart contracts to help cut out intermediaries for small farmers in their supply chain. So that all sounds great. Why don't all companies just adopt the technology to manage their supply chains? Well, this is the part on risk, and I saw Alejandro's giving me a look to wrap up soon, so I'll wrap up very, very quickly. Essentially, companies have invested significant time and money into their own databases. And investing in a new technology, especially if it affects only a narrow aspect of their operations, might be a significant ask. And on top of this, informal and less sophisticated supply chain actors tend to rely on old paper-based systems and other low-tech solutions. So any implementation of new technology would require integration with artisanal and small-scale mining and other vulnerable communities. So it's really critical when discussing all of this, and this is my final point, that we engage responsibly with representatives of communities of artisanal and small-scale mining to make sure they're integrated and not left out of any new technological solution that this industry might be implementing. So thank you. I'll wrap it up very quickly there, and you can take a look at the rest of the paper through the links that our colleagues at UNIDO are sharing.
Thank you very much, Rajat, particularly for providing us this insight on the OECD Responsible Minerals Implementation Program and the guidance that you have developed, particularly for bringing the aspect of the blockchain challenges and the opportunities that they can provide for the industry. Thank you. We will continue now with the last presenter, Jerome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Alejandro, and good afternoon, colleagues. We'll start sharing my screen. Building on what was said by the previous presenter, we've seen the potential for IR in the large-scale mining sector, the potential of blockchain, the importance of responsible supply chains. Now I would like to invite you to a journey to artisanal mining sites, and more specifically, artisanal and small-scale gold mining. This is a sector that UNIDO has been supporting for more than 20 years. And despite the fact that we are talking about artisanal miners, this is actually an industry. We've seen a few of these figures previously. 20% of the gold being produced at the global level comes from artisanal and small-scale gold mining, ASGM. 80% of the workforce involved in the gold mining industry is active in ASGM. So it represents a huge employment potential, mainly in rural areas of more than 70 countries where ASGM takes place. And it's mainly informal sector. At the same time, it represents a great rural development potential, especially if you consider other commodities. If we take the example of a banana, the farmer producing the banana will get somewhere between 10 and 20% of the price of the banana that we will pay here in the supermarket in Europe. However, for gold, 60 to 95% of the international price of gold will remain with the miner. So there is a huge potential to transfer wealth from rich or developed countries to the rural areas of developing countries. So the potential is there. However, there are also many challenges. We've heard a few of them. There are environmental challenges, deforestation, land degradation, pollution. Some challenges that are linked to the widespread use of mercury, that is a perfect medium to separate gold particles from the other particles that are contained in the rocks. In addition, there is often a lot of noise, dust, as well as accident, and unfortunately also some death in artisanal and small-scale gold mining sites. The third type of challenges are related to governance. We've heard it before: corruption, criminality, illicit financial flows, such as money laundering, are unfortunately also linked to ASGM. And finally, social challenges. Child labor, forced labor is also happening on some mining sites. We've heard previously the importance of transparent and responsible supply chains. And I would like now to show you how such a supply chain looks like when we are talking of ASGM. So in terms of challenges, most of the environment, social and health challenges are happening at the extraction and processing steps. The governance challenges mainly at the selling and trading points before reaching the refiner that will purify the gold until 99.99%. And most of the legislation and legal instruments that are developed to control the provenance of the gold put a lot of pressure on the refiner to ensure that this gold is being produced in responsible ways. All this so that us as end customers, we can ensure that the gold that we are using in our mobile phone, in our electronic devices, or in our jewelries is not somehow tainted. I've described this sector as having both a huge potential for development, but at the same time facing quite a lot of challenges. So this is a really complex sector. So what we are trying to do when we are supporting the countries is to have also an integrated approach. So we look at strengthening policies, and often that doesn't mean adding policies, but trying to simplify them to have the miners comply with the regulation. We provide technologies that are mercury-free, but help also the miner improve the gold recovery. We support access to finance so that the miner can invest into these technologies. And a lot of our efforts focus on capacity building. The expected results from this intervention is to enhance formalization of the sector, to reduce mercury, as well as the other environmental, health, and social challenges, and also to contribute to increased traceability and transparency of supply chains. But the starting point and the end point of all our interventions are the miners. What we want is to provide them with environmental, social, and economic benefits. On the map here, you can see in blue past projects that we conducted, and in gold, the ongoing projects that we have distributed over Latin America, Africa, and Asia. Now that I have talked a bit about the potential, the challenges, and our interventions, I would like to go back to the focus of this session and just talk about some of the technologies that can be applied to artisanal and small-scale gold mining. Of course, I'm not going to repeat what was said before, especially blockchain that has a very strong potential. But I would like to talk about maybe some more basic technologies, such as remote sensing. That is very helpful. For example, here you can see on the left-hand side, the gradual growing of the artisanal mining activities in primary forests. So you can see this encroachment of the mining activities over time that is destroying the forest and the environment. Another way to use remote sensing is the right-hand side example. It's an example from Burkina Faso, where it was used to identify the artisanal mining sites. Since this is an informal activity and it's a livelihood for these miners, they are very mobile. They go where the gold is found, and it's very difficult to actually track all these mining sites. So their remote sensing can help identify these sites and also estimate the size of the artisanal mining operations. Another family of interesting technologies is Geographic Information System, GIS. You can see here on the left-hand side first a map of the protected areas. In the second illustration, you can see the gold mining sites. And if you combine both layers, the protected areas and the gold mining site, you can identify the conflicting areas. In that case, you can be sure that there will be some conflicts there with the government and with the local communities, because your gold mining operations are not supposed to happen in protected areas. So that's a very useful tool. And in many countries, we can also add, for example, the mining permits, and to see that there are some overlaps, simply because the mining and the environmental ministries will not be talking to each other. Finally, a third type of technology that I would like to mention, and this was already touched upon, is the tagging, so physical tagging of gold. But there are also other ways that are being tested, such as chemical tagging. So the idea there would be to add a chemical compound at the mining site when the gold is being melted for the first time. And then at the refiner level, the same chemical compound should be found to ensure that the gold that is reaching the refiner is actually also the one that was coming from the mining site. So there are a lot of development in these different tagging or tracing technologies. And overall, we are very interested in all of them. Similar to what Rashad was saying, we are not supporting one over the other. We hope to find or to establish some framework conditions for one of these technology to emerge and to become a standard in the future. And I would like just to finish by summarizing that it is a very complex sector, but there is huge potential. And we recognize in UNIDO that we need to partner both with the technology providers, and we are very excited about the previous technologies that were presented. And at the same time, we want to partner with all the actors that are key stakeholders along the supply chains, because from our perspective, we cannot transform this sector and generate the benefits for the miners if we are not at the same time addressing all the actors of the supply chain. So we are really looking forward to partnering with both the technology providers as well as the actors along the supply chain. And with that, I would like to thank you for your attention, and back to you, Alejandro.
Thank you very much, Jerome, for this particularly this key message that you have shared at the end. I think it provides a good platform for cooperating with other partners, as you mentioned. Thank you very much. I will now start with the first question. The first question will be for Felipe. Yeah, and I am very glad that one person from the audience has already asked something related. So we are more or less covered this. Felipe, We have seen that innovations such as in situ leaching and continuous mining they present tremendous potential for better efficiency in mining. Similarly, by adopting 4 Industrial Revolution technologies, the minerals and metals required to move the world towards a circular economy can be extracted in less environmental destructive ways. What is required to bring these technologies to scale?
Thank you, Alejandro, for the question. Well, in situ leaching has been mainly applied in uranium mining and only tested in some small scale copper and gold deposits. And the most critical factors restricting its applicability are permeability, hydrogeological conditions in sites, and the possibility of achieving selective leachability of the ore body. One of the greatest risks regarding in situ leaching is the containment of the leaching solutions within the zone of interest to prevent the contamination of groundwater. So for this reason, future widespread application of in situ leaching will depend greatly on the technological advance regarding permeability enhancement and hydrogeological management. Regarding continuous extraction, well, these systems and continuous material handling systems have been used for many years in the coal mining industry, but its application in the metallic mining industry has been low. One example is the S11G iron mine of Vale in Brazil. Also, there have been some attempts to create continuous mining systems in underground caving operations. One example of this is the project that Codelco was studying for many years. Even though it was finally dismissed due to problems in its construction phase and industrial validation, previous tests and studies suggested that general great benefits could be achieved in terms of productivity, cost, workforce requirements, among others. So special care must be put in the validation phase of these disruptive projects regarding time, budget, but also about the infrastructure and coordination with the ongoing projects. And regarding the technologies that the 4th Industrial Revolution brings, the challenges are the ones that I mentioned by the end of my presentation regarding cybersecurity, facing in a right way the organizational changes, taking care of the new skills and knowledge that the workforce will need, and also the collaboration between the actors of the industry.
Okay, thank you very much, Felipe, for your comprehensive answer. I will continue now with Angela. Angela, some 40 million people in 80 countries make a living from artisanal mining, while an estimated 150 million are indirectly depending on it. Yeah. However, recent regulations in some markets like the EU has made large companies believe it is too risky to use artisanal mining in their supply chains. Can the enhancing transparency and traceability that blockchains offers help to destigmatize artisanal mining and formalize the sector?
Yeah, so thank you for this question, because this is exactly the important issue, right? Because on the one hand, you have economies and communities who depend on the revenue generated by ASM. And at the same token, if you look at it from the perspective of a compliance manager within a big company, they get very nervous when they see specifically that, materials come from a Kara region. And so I agree to your point, the EU has issued conflict minerals regulations. And so one could fear that these big multinational companies would drag their feet to specifically now source from areas that are a bit tricky. And that's why I think the beauty of digital tools that create this transparency and can actually give an opportunity for people in the ASM community to prove that their materials come from a trusted source, have been created in a way where they haven't been using mercury, where there hasn't been child labor, etc. So for instance, we have a product that's called Ore Source, and that specifically caters to the EU conflict mineral regulation. But just generally speaking, exactly the combination of all of these digital technologies that I have been discussing, namely blockchain linked to tracking technologies, renders the landscape more transparent and specifically changes the job of the compliance manager within a big multinational company. Because if he just has to click on a button on a tool and he sees, okay, this is the documentation I need, and actually everything is perfectly compliant, it's digital, it has been verified because it has been, put on real time on the blockchain, then that's great. And so exactly to your point, that's why I think the beauty of our solution is.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Angela. I will continue now with Rachad. Rachad, as the mining sector moves towards the fourth industrial revolution, the need for standardization is becoming more obvious and urgent. What sort of normative capacity building support is needed to help the mining industry adopt the relevant standards for their digital transformation, addressing issues such as interoperability, safety, or integration of operations along the value chain?
Yeah, that's a big question. I think really the key to coherence is stakeholder engagement. It's creating alignment between government-backed standards, like the OECD guidance and the UN guiding principles on business and human rights, with existing industry-led standards, for example, at mineral exchanges or from the International Council for Mining and Metals and other industry-led standard developers. So multi-stakeholder engagement is key to create policy coherence. And part of any multi-stakeholder process is not just government and industry, but also civil society. So we make sure in all of our outreach efforts and all of our standards development that we include a voice for local and international civil society so that the voices of mining communities are represented as well. So it's a mix of government pushing industry to respond to these issues, industry having buy-in and any policies that develop and making sure the policies are realistic, and then civil society organizations representing the voices of those who are most affected by these issues.
Thank you, Racha. I will continue now with Jeroen. Jeroen, be alert that many colleagues from our side has been asking on the mining sector in UNIDO, what is the work there, but also particularly on the safeguarding the environment and the sustainability of the operations, as you pointed out, all the challenges on this aspect. Yeah. So the question is the following: how is UNIDO rolling out support measures to mining sector of developing countries? How do these measures correspond to the four major dimensions of UNIDO ISID mandate, particularly creating shared prosperity, advancing economic competitiveness, safeguarding the environment, and strengthening knowledge and institutions?
Thank you, Alejandro. I'll do my best to answer. I think we have basically two ways of supporting our countries. One of them is through the program that we have on artisanal and small-scale gold mining that I was describing. And the other one is through a new perspective, a new pilot project that we have also in UNIDO. Going back to actually both of them, we need to take into consideration who is the target audience, who are the beneficiaries from our interventions. And in our case now, it's mostly the artisanal miners. And for them, this is a livelihood. They do not have a lot of other ways of earning their living. So we always use an economic perspective. So our rationale is based on economic perspective. We are offering, helping them to basically recover more gold by using less or no mercury. So, and helping them to have also shorter and more transparent supply chain, which means that they have a more direct access to the international gold market. In other words, that the percentage of the price of the gold that is currently being lost along the supply chains, because there are many intermediaries, would go in their pocket instead of these intermediaries. However, our main donor for our activities is interested in environmental benefits. So when we are talking to the donor, we are focusing our argumentation on safeguarding the environment. still with the same objective, creating shared prosperity for the artisanal miners. So that's the approach, but I would like just to focus on the second part. And these are some projects that we are now actually implementing jointly with colleagues from the agribusiness department, as well as colleagues in the field in Colombia, where we are looking at improving the responsible use of mineral resources, but at the same time developing other alternative livelihood based on high value biodiversity products, for example, that are offering, in addition to artisanal mining, other types of livelihood. So I think that's a quite interesting way forward for us to partner with the different experts in the house to look at the mining sector from different perspectives, because interestingly, as an extractive industry, of course, it's not super environmentally sustainable, but I think if it's done really responsibly in a good way, these minerals are needed for our world today. So we are just doing our best to support a responsible way of extracting these resources.
Great, thank you, Jerome, for this nice and comprehensive answer. I will continue now with Felipe. Felipe, industrial mining has long been a male-dominated sector, and fewer than 1 in 5 mining leaders are women. One of the hopes of the digital transformation is that a better work environment combined with higher qualification demands will create better gender equality. In which ways can the 4th Industrial Revolution allow for changed gender patterns and equal opportunity for women and men in this sector?
Thank you, Alejandro. Well, the adoption of these technologies, especially the implementation of integrated operation centers, are already contributing to better levels of gender equality. This comes from a combination of factors. First, geoscience degrees and qualification, such as mining engineering, metallurgy, which are usually the most needed qualifications on site, have historically shown low levels of women participation. On the other hand, environments with advanced digitization and automation need a wider range of qualifications, many related to information technologies or others, which have greater levels of women participation. And at the same time, integrated operation centers offer better conditions to reconcile personal and familiar life and work, facilitating the gender inclusion. In Chile, for example, there has been an effort from the industry to improve the levels of gender equality. And for example, in 2004, the overall women participation in the industry was about 4%. And in 2020 and the first month of 2021, this comes to close 10% of women participation. But when it comes to the integrated operation centers, this figure comes to close to 50%. So you can see that these numbers are a powerful signal that digital transformation and gender inclusion are indeed closely related.
Okay, thank you very much. I will continue now with Angela. Angela, I have a challenge for you here. We have received several questions and they are all asking for you to answer that. Yeah.
Okay.
So I will try to combine what we discussed before with more or less the main objective of the questions that has been posed. Yeah. Well, the question is the following: to what extent could smaller mining operators capitalize on potential advantages that 4th Industrial Revolution technologies like blockchain offers? Yeah, and particularly how these technologies are applicable to rural and remote areas where connectivity could be a challenge. And this is the new part that I added here as a challenge for Friday afternoon for you.
Okay, so I mean, I think there are 2 parts of this question. So again, I think the point is, you're right, these new 4th Industrial Revolution technologies are very relevant for empowering these ASM communities and cutting out the middleman, just because the power of digital is to actually enable direct links. And so you're in a completely different ecosystem. Now your question though is, what about broadband connectivity in a lot of these remote areas, which is an issue and can be answered. There's a short and there's a long answer for this question. So I'll try and give you the short one. I think, first of all, there's not one technology alone that is the solution. And I hope I showed that in my presentation. It is very much like a mosaic or a puzzle. So, you won't only use RFID combined with, I don't know, a cellular system to track material across the global supply chain. Actually, in various instances of the supply chain, you will be using different technologies. So there isn't one technology that enables that type of tracking. So that's the first point. However, you're right. And a lot of these rural areas is and is not that much broadband connectivity. So for instance, we were just discussing this with a colleague the other day. You would be surprised that in certain parts of the world, you have better 4G coverages than in some European capitals, and I will not name the name of that capital. But so first of all, there is a lot of connectivity in areas that could be considered remote. Now, if there is no broadband connectivity, because you're right, we have worked on projects where there is neither 2G, 3G, whatever type of coverage, and of course no fixed line coverage. So what do you do? And so there are several scenarios. First of all, you can use your mobile phone, and then once you are in an area of coverage, then the mobile phone can transmit that information. That's one solution. Again, satellite and drone technology are absolutely stellar in actually recording and seeing what is happening in the field. So it's once again, yet another complementary technology. So, I mean, that is the short answer. There is a long answer because we actually have a very nice white paper on this topic. And I can talk about this for 10 hours if you want, but I think we have limited time. So I think I will leave it at that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Angela. You have provided a very nice answer, which I fully agree with you on that one. Thank you. I will continue now with Rachad. Rachad, much of the 4 industrial revolution technologies depend on mining. As an example, 28 of 29 elements used in mobile phones need mining. This creates extensive value chain opportunities for small and medium scale mining producers from developing countries. What is needed to make advanced technologies accessible to them? There is a risk that technology gaps can lead to blind spots for oversight.
Yeah, very good question. So there's 2 aspects to this. First is government has a critical and an obvious role to play to provide investments in logistics and infrastructure needed to close the technology gap. And that's local governments, but also official development assistance from foreign governments. That's the obvious answer. The less obvious answer, but still critical to the solution, is to encourage companies to engage with those mine sites rather than cut them out of their supply chains. Because if companies are engaging, then they'll make sure that that solution reaches the smaller mine sites as well. And so yeah, it's important to emphasize that any regulation should be encouraging sustained continued engagement. It shouldn't be, this isn't like your typical compliance approach where the solution is to just cut them out of your supply chain. The solution is actually to continue engaging, and companies will actually drive closing the technology gap.
Okay, thank you very much. I will continue quickly with Jerome. Jerome, the paradigm change brought about the 4th industrial revolution will require new skills in order to unlock the benefits of digital transformation. What are the challenges faced by artisanal and small-scale miners when building new competencies and upskilling their workforce in these key areas, and how UNIDO can provide assistance to member states in this endeavor?
Thanks, Alejandro. I think there are 2 major challenges related to that issue. One of them is that adopting new technologies means forgetting about the previous ones. So it's a change. And any change requires some help and some support. Miners, even if we tell them that they should change to another technology that will give them more gold, it takes time to convince them. You know, they have been using mercury for decades. Changing, just the simple fact of changing is one of the challenges. And the other one, I think, is that we have to remember the different starting point from the people that we are now discussing here and the miners. We cannot adopt the same teaching or approaches for people who had a full scholarity and went to graduate studies and so on, as with most of the artisanal miners who had limited education. So I think it's important also to acknowledge that and to tailor our intervention accordingly. And in that case, I think UNIDO is very well positioned. We are working quite a lot with vocational and technical training institutions. And that, I think, is a very good way to engage with miners and technology providers also at the national level.
Okay, thank you very much, Jerome. We are really behind the time with this session already. At this point, I would like to thank you, all of you, for sharing all this knowledge and the presentations with us. I would like to remind to all participants in the session that we have recorded it and it will be made available at the Knowledge Hub. All the questions posted in the chat will be addressed by the speakers later on, and you will receive a reply answer from them. Please do not hesitate to contact me or my colleagues at the Office of the Managing Director. I would like also to take the opportunity to invite all of you to attend the following webinar of this series, which will examine the potential of 4th Industrial Revolution technologies to support the production of pharmaceuticals in developing countries. The invitation will be sent out soon. With this, we are ready to close the session. We thank you very much, all of you, for being here with us today, and we look forward to working with everyone to implement our digital transformation strategy. Have a nice afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a nice day.
Bye-bye.